top 10 most corrupt African leaders in history. From human rights violations to squandering of government funds for personal gain. When it comes to Africa, both during and after colonialism, many African countries can be recognized as having some of the worst leaders the world has ever seen. Welcome to Omar. On today's countdown, we will be talking about the top 10 most corrupt African leaders in history. But before we start, tell us what country you are from in the comments section below. And hey, be sure to subscribe to Omar for more interesting videos. Number 10. Mobutu Sese Seko of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mobutu Sese Seko was a leader who was able to bleed his country dry while still enjoying the support of countries like the United States. Mobutu was in power from 1965 to 1997. He took power directly and declared himself leader of the Congo. He created a one-party state with all the power in his hands. His highly centralized government allowed him to loot the country with impunity, leading many to call his government a kleptocracy due to the massive amount of funds he stole from the government. He forced all foreign investors out of the country and nationalized all foreign-owned firms. The management of the firms was passed to relatives and allies. He lived an opulent lifestyle with state funds and amassed a personal fortune of more than $8 billion for himself. His reign was also filled with human rights abuses. He imprisoned, tortured and killed his political opponents publicly, just like in Game of Thrones. His reign of terror and theft came to an end with the First Congo War, when Laurent Desire Kabila took control of the government with the support of Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. Number 9. Charles Taylor of Liberia. Charles Taylor is one of the few corrupt leaders on this list that resigned from power. He was in power from 1997 to 2003. As president, he created his own private army while reducing the size of the armed forces of Liberia. He was charged with war crimes for his ties to the violence in Sierra Leone in 2003, which included murder, enslavement and the use of child soldiers. He also was believed to have accepted diamonds in exchange for weapons to support the rebels in Sierra Leone. His corruption of the treasury and industry was as bad as his human rights abuses. He used that money not only for his own gain, but to fund rebels in other countries and to destabilize the region. In 1999, he was accused of being a gun runner and a diamond smuggler. He was indicted on 11 counts of crimes against humanity, and in 2003, he was asked to step down by the international community. He was later convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Number 8. Idriss Déby of Chad. Idriss Déby started his rise to fame in Chad when he joined the military. Idriss Déby was once the commander-in-chief of the army. He remained a strong and loyal member of the army until the central authority fell apart in 1979. He took power in late 1990 and has been in power ever since. As president, he put Chad on a path to economic growth with the building of an oil pipeline. However, the pipeline ended up bringing the corruption within Chad to the forefront. The revenues from the Chad-Cameroon pipeline development and the pipeline project were supposed to be used to combat famine within Chad. Instead, he took the funds to buy more weapons for the military in order to combat the numerous coup attempts against him. His regime has also been characterized by human rights abuses against his opposition, and it is clear that all of the elections held since he took power have been fraudulent. In 2005, he eliminated term limits and said he would reinstate them in 2016, but the people have little hope that he will stand by his word. However, coup attempts continue to come after every election, and the economic conditions of majority of the population continues to decline. Number 7. José Eduardo dos Santos of Angola. José dos Santos is the second longest serving leader in Africa. He has been in power since 1979. He rose to prominence as part of the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, which fought for Angola's independence. After the country's independence, he became a member of the Central Committee and eventually served as Deputy Prime Minister. On September 20, 1979, he was elected as the second President of Angola and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. José dos Santos has repeatedly stated he will step down as president and elections will be held, but the elections always end with him being re-elected. While on the surface he has boosted the Angolan economy and developed the oil sector of the country. However, as the economy of Angola grows, the wealth of its citizens remains stagnant, with almost 70% of the population living on $2 a day, while the government budget has grown to $69 billion. Under his rule, $32 billion in oil revenue disappeared. Corruption is like a family business in the Dos Santos family. He has a net worth estimated at $20 billion, and his daughter has a net worth of $3.8 billion. What do you think? Number 6. General Idi Amin of Uganda. General Idi Amin first rose to prominence when he took the rank of Major General in the Ugandan army, following its independence. He became commander of the army and then took power in Uganda through a military coup in January 1971. He was in power for only 8 years, but it was some of the worst years in the history of Uganda. When he took power, he promised that he was not a politician and he would only stay in power until free elections could be held. However, a week later he declared himself president and suspended numerous parts of the Ugandan constitution. He created a military dictatorship where military officers were put in top positions of the government and the military tribunals were put above civil law. He created the State Research Bureau, which would torture and execute anyone who opposed his rule. Thousands of people were killed and displaced during his rule. He redirected most of the country's money to the military and himself, which left the rest of Uganda to suffer in abject poverty. He took so much of the country's money for himself that the inflation rate in Uganda rose to 1000% by the time he was driven out of power. Number 5. Omar al-Bashir of Sudan. Omar al-Bashir came to power in 1989 after he led a military coup against the democratically elected leader, Sadiq al-Mahdi. In 1993, he declared himself president and disbanded all rival political parties. He has held 3 elections since he took power and was re-elected each time. However, each election has been under fire for corruption. Omar al-Bashir is currently the only standing president with multiple arrest warrants issued against him by the International Criminal Court. His warrant is for crimes against humanity, largely for the crisis in Darfur, where he was said to be connected to the genocide that occurred there. He was indicted on crimes of murder, extermination, torture, rape, forcible transfer and other war crimes. However, since Sudan and al-Bashir do not recognize the International Criminal Court, he continues to remain president. His corruption goes far beyond his crimes against humanity. He has also done a great deal of looting the country. Leaked diplomatic cables suggest that Omar al-Bashir has as much as $15 billion stashed away in various banks across the globe. Number 4. Teodoro Obiang Nguema of Equatorial Guinea. The name Teodoro Obiang Nguema might sound familiar. That is because he took power from his uncle Francisco Macias Nguema in 1979. He holds power with an iron fist and remains the longest serving president in the world and the longest serving leader in Africa. He started his rule on a positive note, saying his leadership would end the tyranny of his uncle. However, he continues to win presidential elections through fraudulent means, winning as much as 97% of the votes. Obiang has also refused to step down from his position as president despite term limits in the 2011 constitution. There have been numerous human rights abuses, including killings by the government, unlawful imprisonment, torture, and horrible prison conditions. His theft of state funds has increased his personal wealth and the wealth of his family to staggering levels. Obiang and his cabinet get billions each year in oil revenue, but it does not translate to more public spending, but rather spending on presidential expenses. Number 3. Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe was the president of Zimbabwe from 1987 to 2018. He won the election for prime minister in 1980 and was sworn into office when Zimbabwe gained its independence. As soon as he came into power, he created a single-party state and employed a North Korean-trained security force to deal with dissidents. In December of 1987, he declared himself president and consolidated all powers of the states and gave himself the power to dissolve the parliament and declare martial law. Mugabe continued to win presidential elections due to widespread corruption and fraud. Many believe that the fraud and corruption are the only reasons why he remained in power. Zimbabwe has the highest rate of unemployment of any African country, with a 70% unemployment rate. It is estimated that the country loses over $3 billion to corruption every year. Most of his corruption comes from his desires to consolidate power and rig the elections so that he can stay in power indefinitely. He is also known for looting the diamond deposits and killing or torturing his opposition. Number 2. General Sani Abacha of Nigeria. General Sani Abacha ruled for only 5 years, but during that time, he operated a secretive and brutal regime, which left Nigeria in absolute poverty. He obtained power through a military coup on November 17, 1993. The following year, he issued a decree that gave him absolute power by placing the authority of his government over that of the courts. He also issued a decree that would allow him to imprison anyone for up to 3 months without trial. However, General Sani Abacha's economic achievements were very impressive considering the dire economic straits the country had been in prior to his leadership. Today, General Sani Abacha is considered to be one of the most corrupt leaders in history because of the amount of money he stole from his own country. The main export of Nigeria was oil. Abacha and his partners took control of nearly every aspect of the industry. Did you know that Abacha stole over $10 billion from the government? Human rights abuses were also rampant during his tenure. He was known to kill or imprison any political opposition. Torture and lengthy imprisonments for minor crimes were also common during his reign. Number 1. Francisco Macias Nguema of Equatorial Guinea. Francisco was the very first president of Equatorial Guinea, and he created a bad example for those that would follow. In 1964, he became deputy prime minister, and he became president when he won the only free election the country has ever had in 1968. Francisco declared that anyone who threatened the president or the government would be punished with death. He also said that insulting the president or his cabinet was punished with 30 years in prison. Did you know that during President Francisco's reign, nearly a third of the population of Equatorial Guinea was killed or exiled? Francisco Nguema was a very paranoid man, and one who would relinquish power to no one. He stayed in a hut in his ancestral village and kept all of the national treasury under his bed. He was also distrusting of anyone who was educated or appeared to be educated. He killed or exiled anyone who appeared to be educated, and it became very dangerous for anyone to have any books or papers in their possession. It was this paranoia that eventually led to the end of President Francisco Nguema's reign. He was overthrown by his own nephew, Teodoro Obiang in 1979. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching, and hey, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos.